were there really giants roaming the earth in ancient times? Well, with cases of massive 8, 10, 12, even 18-foot bones being unearthed,
it certainly seems like there's more to our history than we're often taught. Let's check it out.
So pictured here is a man named Les Eaton lying next to a skeleton in a doctor's office. Keep in mind, Les Eaton was 6 feet tall, and this thing just dwarfs him. The skeleton was discovered in 1933 near Steelville, Missouri. A young boy had been searching for arrowheads when he stumbled on something a little more interesting, a skeleton measuring over 8 feet in length. The skeleton was in pretty good condition, too. A local doctor named Dr. Parker had it displayed in his office for a while, allowing people to come and gawk at the sheer size of the remains or lie next to it and have someone take a photo of them. Eventually, it was sent to the Smithsonian Institution for further study, but that's really all the information there is about this guy. After it was shipped off, it was never heard about again. There's been little to no follow-up information available, so it's definitely understandable why some people think there could be something sus going on here.
8 foot plus would be considered giant today, so imagine all the necks that would have broken looking up at this guy sometime between 1000 and 200 BC, when the average height of a female was merely 5'1" and the average height of a male was 5'8", which, to be fair, isn't that far from the average height of men and women today, with women coming in at 5.4 and men 5.9. Still, the discovery of an 8 foot 1.5 inch skeleton was a massive find when it was excavated near a massive burial mound in Ohio back in 2012. At the time, the skeleton belonged to the tallest man ever recorded in human history. Of course, today that record has been broken by 9.5 inches, but still. Along with the incredibly tall skeleton, lead researcher on the project, Hugh, found many other bones of unusual size, including what he described as a giant jawbone. Oh, and all of the bones found at the site were authenticated by the Smithsonian Institution. So you can rest easy tonight knowing that this giant prehistoric man was 100% undeniably real. Or you can toss and turn through nightmares of him chasing you through a dark forest. It's your choice.
Back in 1870, a story came out in the paper about the discovery of an 18-foot skeleton. Not the skeleton of some gigantic animal either. No, this was said to be a human skeleton, or something resembling a human. Really hard to say if an 18-foot tall giant can be classified as simply a human. Now, could this one have been an incredible exaggeration or a hoax? Of course, but it is really fascinating that this was a story that had been published in a newspaper. The story came out in the Oil City Times in 1870. It read, "On Tuesday morning last, while Mr. William Thompson, assisted by Mr. Robert R. Smith, was engaged in making an excavation near the house of the former, about half a mile north of West Hickory, they exhumed an enormous helmet of iron, which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought to light a sword, which measured 9 feet in length. After some little time, they discovered the bones of 2 enormous feet. Following up on the leads they had unexpectedly struck, in a few hours' time they had unearthed the well-preserved remains of an enormous giant belonging to a species of the human family, which probably inhabited this and other parts of the world, at the time of which the Bible speaks when it says, 'And there were giants in those days.' The bones of the skeleton are a remarkable white. The teeth are all in their places and all of extraordinary size. When he was in the flesh, he must have stood 18 feet tall in his stockings. These remarkable relics will be shipped to New York early next week. These remains were found about 12 feet under the surface of a mound which had been thrown up probably centuries ago."
Sometimes the government hides things from the public in order to keep us safe, and sometimes the government hides things from us because they want to keep us dumb, which is probably the case when it comes to the 12-foot skeleton that was dug up and was promptly reburied in 1819 in Lompoc, Rancho, California. Now, to be fair, when the giant skeleton was dug up by soldiers living on the ranch who hacked their way through a thick layer of cemented gravel to reach the sarcophagus holding the skeleton, the natives of the land deemed it a god and asked that it be reburied. But you're telling me that since then no one has used any kind of scanning technology or taken any soil samples from the burial site in an effort to authenticate and study the giant bones? I gotta call BS on this one. My guess, the skeleton isn't there anymore because it was taken a long time ago to be studied by people who don't want us to know it exists. maybe it's an alien.
The Bulgarian Giant. Back in 2015, downtown in the ancient city of Varna, archaeologists found the remains of an exceptionally tall man for the time he was alive. While excavating a Copper Age necropolis near Varna, researchers uncovered the remains of a skeleton dating back approximately 6,500 years. It was found partially buried beneath an ancient fortress wall, positioned east-west, with its hands placed on the waist, which was how a lot of burial practices happened at the time. The skeleton was much taller than the average person of that era, close to 7 feet in height. The skeleton was found in a carefully dug grave, meaning the big tall man likely held a high position in their society. Some things just never change.
In 1895, the Smithsonian purchased an 8-foot, 4-inch tall mummy for $500. In 1908, they called it a hoax, but experts aren't so sure. The first report of the giant appeared in 1895. It claimed the mummy was 9 feet tall when in reality it was just 2 inches less than 8.5. Still, the Smithsonian made the decision to purchase the artifact for $500 that same year after examining it and declaring it to be a legitimate find. Now, all of a sudden, 13 years later in 1908, they called it a hoax and claimed that it was made of gelatin. I really don't know how a bunch of America's best scientists could have possibly missed that for an entire 13 years. Not to mention it wasn't cheap. $500 back then is equal to well over 14 grand today, and the Smithsonian didn't have the same funding in the 1890s that it does now. I'm just saying something's not adding up, and what's even stranger is that something quite similar happened in Oklahoma around the same time. A mummified giant measuring in at 8 feet 5 inches was put on display, only to disappear shortly after word began to spread. It sounds a bit like a cover-up if you ask me, which you kinda did. I mean, you clicked on the video.
Even the New York Times came out with an article about a giant. Back in February of 1902, an article came out with the title reading New Mexico Discovery, 12-foot giant found. According to the article, a discovery was made near an ancient burial ground. Luciana Quintana, a landowner, had found 2 stones with mysterious inscriptions, and beneath were bones from a frame that was estimated to be at least 12 feet long. Excavators said they found a 4-foot-long forearm and a well-preserved jaw, with lower teeth ranging from the size of a hickory nut to that of a large walnut. That was how they just described sizes back then, I guess, just used nuts. The giant's chest reportedly had a circumference of 7 feet. I wonder how many nuts that is. At the time, they speculated that thousands of other giant skeletons were waiting to be found. Legends have been told by early Spanish invaders about giant humanoids roaming the plains, and Native American carvings also seemed to depict some race of massive human.
Directly after a groundbreaking discovery made in 1959, lead researcher Donald Dregu was quoted saying, "The individual was of large proportions. When measured in the tomb, his length was approximately 7 feet 2 inches, and all of the long boxes were very heavy." The skeleton in question was found in Cresap Mound in West Virginia inside of a burial mound containing at least 5 other skeletons, a clay bench, and a fire basin, which might explain why the top half of the 7-foot 2-inch skeleton was burned. Well, it explains how, not really why. And it also doesn't explain why the bones of the skeleton were unusually heavy either. At the time the discovery was made, it was massive, but nothing really came of it, leading myself and many others to wonder why. What are they hiding?
Scattered across Sardinia are the famous giants' tombs, built during the island's Nuragic period. These structures, often reaching up to 100 feet in length, have been the cause of a lot of local legends. Mainly that these tombs were built to house some very large people, maybe even giants. But the mainstream archaeology world explains them as communal burial sites. The tombs are long chambers constructed from massive slabs placed vertically and horizontally to form a corridor-like structure. The chamber is then covered with smaller rocks and earth, creating a mound. A distinctive feature of these tombs is their entrances, which had a semicircular row of standing stones. They look pretty cool. Definitely something I'd want to check out one day.
A giant mound shaped like a giant snake containing giant skeletons. Fitting, right? Serpent Mound in Ohio is the world's largest surviving effigy mound, which is super cool in and of itself, but it got a whole lot cooler when, in the 1890s, Professor Frederick Ward Puntham decided to excavate some of the mound's mounds located next to the effigy. What did he find? Well, seeing as this is a video about ancient giants, it would be pretty weird if I said unicorns. In reality, the professor found multiple 6-foot-tall skeletons and possibly one that was 7 feet. In a postcard sent by the professor, the giant skeleton can be seen laid out on a large stone, and underneath the skeleton it says, "Skeleton of mound builder, 7 feet in length, Serpent mound." The only thing is, the skeleton is cut off at the shins, and the professor never confirmed if the measurement was an estimate of what the height of the entire skeleton might have been, or what the found bones measured up to, meaning that the skeleton could have possibly measured in at much taller than 7 feet, or perhaps slightly shorter. Again, the discovery didn't really go anywhere. It kind of just fell off the face of the earth, leading us to wonder why.
I, for one, am gonna go seek out a hickory nut because I've never heard of that before in my life. But apparently it's the size of a giant's tooth, so.
That's pretty neat. I'm 10'5". It's been nice.